Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host,
Rhona Pierce, live from Unleash US in Las Vegas. Welcome, everyone. We are here. It is day 2 of Unleash. It's day 1 of the podcast Takeover. I am your guest host, Rhona Pierce, and I'm here with Cynthia Abbot Kerr. I'm so excited to speak to Cynthia today. Cynthia is the founder and CEO of WellPay AI, and we'll get to talking a lot more about WellPay later today. But first, I want to know, I know you had a happy hour yesterday at one of my favorite places in Vegas, which is the Vanderpump Garden, and I wasn't able to make it because of my flight. How was the happy hour? How did it go?
The happy hour was fantastic. I think Vanderpump Garden is always just such a fun and special place. We had a great time. We got the chance to connect with some clients, some returning clients, some new clients, and it's just a fun space. We gave everyone conference survival kits that I think you probably really would have liked. So,
Tell me a bit about that. What's in the survival kit?
So it's your, customary WellPay chapstick, of course, because we're all traveling, lips get chapped. A nice hand wipe because you've been shaking hands and touching everyone. Some liquid IV in the white peach flavor. Some trail mix and some gummy bears. And I can attest that everything in the pouch is fantastic because I tried everything while assembling said pouch at my dining room table. So, quality control testing.
That is the type of swag that I can get behind. Absolutely. So, Cynthia, if we look back across your career, is there a moment that sparked your passion for, who told you, okay, we need to fix how companies are approaching compensation?
I think it was the progression of the experiences that I had had. When I started my career in compensation, working for Tech Data many years ago, it was still very manual, very, very spreadsheet, very, laborious process. And that still exists today. And so experiencing that and then exploring possible solutions that could improve that led me to where I am and led me to start WellPay.
Tell us a bit about WellPay.
Yeah, so we're a compensation services company. So what that means is I'll come into your business and work with you to help you design and align your pay strategies. So I will look at all of your information, your census data, your job descriptions, and also work with you to align on a survey or market reference point that works for your business. And then from there, take all of that information and come back to you and say, here are the recommendations that we make. Now, you may be saying to me, okay, Cynthia, that sounds like general compensation consulting. And I'll say to you, yes, because there's not a lot that's new under the sun, except the way we move and the way we operate. So given our patented technology, I can do this at a much faster rate and also at a much lower cost than a lot of other organizations. We can move quickly and efficiently and get you to a point to where you don't have so much decision fatigue. I find that in a lot of times when it comes to, having led compensation teams and also deploying programs at organizations of a lot of size and scale, it's all of the various pieces you have to make decisions on that lead to that fatigue and that then lead to that erosion of accuracy. And so I often held the thesis that if we could cut down on that fatigue and we could use technology like WellPay, that we could really get ahead and we could be full partners to the business, especially under the lens of compensation. Because on its face, it should be really simple, right? But we know that there's so much complexity that goes into it. And it's the nuance and the decisions in the nuance that create that decision fatigue and also the time it takes to make those decisions. Yeah. So using technology can really move us forward in a way that the decisions still need to be made, but you haven't had to climb through all of the muck to get to it. You didn't have to run 15 miles to get to the 16th mile. You can just meet me at mile 16 because WellPay Pro has done all of the running.
Cool. Very, very cool. So, because you've been in HR for many years,
yes,
that compensation is one of those things where people it's it's such a tricky thing. You either are like it or into it or ooh, compensation, want to stay away from it. What's a myth that exist about compensation that companies have that you really think needs to go away?
That it's easy.
Mm.
That just because we live in a time of tremendous data doesn't mean that the administration or design or practice of compensation has gotten, quote, easier.
Mm.
You're still talking about design. You're still talking about architecture. You're still talking about making decisions about pay that affects people. And those are still very heavy decisions.
Yeah.
So just because we've moved further ahead and further up the technology curve, and I say this as someone who has a technology company, I think sometimes individuals can think, oh, that's easy. That's, you know, and it also I think comes from the fact that we live in a very instant time now. Everything else you interact with, you're touching, a one touch and boom, the app opens. What we don't think about is the millions of lines of code that run behind to make that app or that phone work.
Yeah.
And so it's a very similar space. I think it still requires the same level of attention and detail and decision making. We're just going to use technology to help move it forward. But I would say that the thing that I think needs to be dispelled is that, oh, it's just easy.
It's absolutely not. And I love how you bring the human element into it, because yes, it's a lot of data. It's a lot of things on the company side that you're protecting. But at the end of the day, you're making decisions that impact someone's life.
Of course.
There are lots of states now implementing pay transparency laws. Some like it.
Yeah.
I personally love it.
Yeah.
What's your take on this trend and where it's headed?
Well, one, I think it's really good. I think information makes all of us better. I think that, and I've told clients this, every company is going to be on their own pay transparency journey. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's thrust upon you depending on your location. Other times you're trying to, educate your population in that space and help them make that move into pay transparency, pay equity. I think because it is a newer concept, it can be kind of scary. But I've found that the more we embrace information and also we share information that we are comfortable with, in working with leaders and really working for pay explainability, because I think that's actually what transparency is here's the information we use to make decisions. Here's how those decisions impact your pay. Pay is very personal.
Yeah.
And so having that information, and then you can say, okay, this pay works for me, or maybe it doesn't. And that's your personal choice, right? But trying to not share, to not divulge, people are gonna, if you don't give information, people create their own information in the void. And so I think pay transparency is here to stay. I think it's gonna continue to expand and look differently. And I think it's necessary because like you and I've talked about, pay is very personal. Pay is also how you plan your life.
Yes.
Right? So if you're making all of these other decisions, you need to know how you're paid.
Absolutely. How do you think it's reshaping the way that companies think and plan their compensation strategies?
I think it's requiring a longer horizon plan as far as understanding not just this role, but the next role, the roles up and down in, to throw a comp term, job architecture, right? Or the roles across the company. Or if we promote this person, what will the impact of that be? I had a client not too long ago that they had a lot of trepidation around pay transparency. They said, well, what happens if, we'll use you and I in this example. And we'll say, what happens if, I find out your pay and what have you, and what will that be? And I said, well, if these two people wanted to call each other and talk about their pay already, they could.
Yes.
The system is the keeper of that information, but it's not something that people couldn't share already. So trying to stop that, it really isn't going to have that much impact. And when this company moved to full pay transparency, meaning that each employee could see their compensation, where they set in the pay band, it really didn't amount to much fireworks. We had done such a compelling job of educating on, here's the process, here's how we thought about this, here's the information we use, here's what you're going to see in the system, here's what that means to you.
I think the reason why, and correct me if I'm wrong, that people have this fear is because in the past, when that has happened, it has been this huge problem. But it's been this huge problem, and in my opinion, because there wasn't a structure, there wasn't a clear way to explain to someone why seemingly I should be making the same thing as you, but I'm not. When you have that structure, when you can explain, look, yes, you're in the same role. However, Rhona can do this, this, this. Cynthia can do this, this, this. That's how you squash that conversation.
Correct. That, yes, you may be in the same role, but you have different experiences. You have different contributions. Perhaps you've been in that role for longer. So therefore you had more opportunities at pay increases than perhaps myself coming new into that role. Perhaps you've done that role or another role in a previous company. Yes. So you came in, to your point, with a lot more experience. What I always encourage managers to do is to not talk about anyone else when we're talking about someone's pay.
100%.
And so when someone says, well, what about Cynthia? What is she getting? And I'll say, well, let's talk about you and how your pay impacts you, how your pay is aligned to the market. So here's the market, here's your pay, right? Because you're not in that other job. You haven't walked that other person's walk. You haven't lived their life. You don't know what experiences they have or don't have. Exactly. So kind of all of this like tangential comparison, and Seth gets this and Bobby Sue gets that, but you're not those people. You're you with your experience. Now, if you're not paid to market and, you're saying, hey, I want to have a deeper conversation, absolutely, as you should. And you should understand all the details, because some companies are in a position where they can't make these big swathing pay increases. They can't. And that's okay. I think that's where the honesty comes in, to say, listen, we know you're here. Our goal is to get you over here. It's going to take time. I think it's all about the transparency of the information and the story, and so that people feel that sense of buy-in and brought along.
Hey everybody, Adam here from the Podcast. Today's podcast is brought to you by the team at Fountain. Fountain is your full-service frontline workforce management platform. I have to tell you, Fountain's offerings are some of the most robust I've seen for any product in the space. They offer full solutions for hiring, managing, and retention. They are truly a one-stop shop focused on the frontline workforce. They also create informative content using their data. For example, they analyze a bunch of data from their fast food chains and created a trend report you could download now on their website. They also have a new ebook out called Frontline Voices. There's a lot to dive into. Certainly check it out. And you could learn more at fountain.com, linked in the show notes. Thank you.
So your platform uses AI to transform compensation. What's one way that you think AI is like changing the game here in HR, and HR teams haven't fully grasped?
Well, I think there's a couple pieces. So starting at the beginning of your question around WellPay. So I think for us, we can move faster based on the technology that we have. So your typical compensation project could take anywhere from 6 to 9 months. Yes. Right? We can move in a space of weeks.
Oh, wow.
Because of how quickly we can ingest information and come back to you and say, okay, here's what we recommend. What would you like to do? And you're doing that real time feedback, analysis, mapping, framing, modeling with us. It's not like a spreadsheet goes to you and then you're working your full-time job, and then somewhere in between all those hours, you're going to find time to get it back to me. Right?
Yeah.
We're doing a lot of real-time iteration, that real-time feedback. And also it gives me a chance to see how you react to, is this a strategy that's going to align for the business and their pay, or are we way off? Right? Mm-hmm. Because you as the leader, we're going to make you the head of HR in this conversation. You have to be very comfortable with the organization's pay strategy, and you have to have a lot of design and involvement, because you're going to be the biggest campaign and cheerleader of this program. I think we're going to see more augmentation and support in the form of AI for HR teams. I think we still, though, have a long way to go as far as training models that give us accurate information. So for WellPay, we've been training our model for 7 years.
Wow.
Before we took our business public. Public being, in the market space. And so for us, that means we have a very low hallucination rate. So our hallucination rate is less than 1%. And that's huge.
That's
because
amazing.
Typical hallucination rate's about 30.
Yeah.
And so what I would advise for HR teams that are implementing AI in any space is to make sure you're training the model with the information and answers that align for your business, and that you walk along beside it to make sure it's giving you, the outcomes that you need. That these models, these AIs still need hand-holding to get us where we want to go. But I think it's very much the teams that adapt and use this technology are going to be further ahead, because we live in a time of information, like we talked about, instant information.
Yes.
So your population, your workforce isn't going to let you have 3 weeks to get back to them. They want to know. And we also live in a time of a lot of self-service. right? I'll go out and read things and then come back to you if I have a question.
Yeah.
But if I can, interact with the chat and understand how my 401k works, my questions are answered even better.
Yeah.
So I think we're seeing some convergence of that you have a workforce that's more technology adapt and capable and more inclined to explore self-service. And then you have AIs that are meeting that moment. We just still need to train them in a way that, behooves the business.
Amazing. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your transition from HR executive to founder of a tech company. What's the most unexpected lesson that you've learned in this time?
I would think probably the way people are going to interact with you and perceive you. So I spent a lot of my life in corporate America, climbing the ranks. I started as an analyst and made my way to vice president. And if you'd asked me 5 years ago, that's where I thought my path would continue on, right? Maybe working for large organizations or maybe taking on different projects, but in the corporate space. I think that as an entrepreneur, your network and your support structure is going to look different.
Yeah.
And that people are going to interact with you differently. Once you have a business and you're selling a service, you're going to be approached differently than when you were a customer. And so I think it's, as we navigate this world, I think that's the space that I've had to continuously kind of remind myself of.
What's the main difference in how people approach you?
There are certain opportunities that are going to come your way when you're wearing your corporate sleeve versus there are other opportunities that are going to come your way when you're an entrepreneur. I think there's probably more caution that people use when approaching you or when you approach them, given that you have a business. I always say we're not trying to hard sell anyone on the WellPay side, right? I find that if you're looking for compensation services, you kind of already in that space and you want to have a conversation. If not, that's great. But I'm not trying to upsell you, you've bought this diamond and now I'm trying to upsell you these earrings, right? It's not that space. But I would say it's the way we, a lot of us are conditioned to navigate the world in kind of that corporate sphere and being external to it is a different walk.
Yeah, it definitely is for sure. So I have a few rapid fire questions, just whatever comes to mind. What's one buzzword you wish we dropped from the compensation conversation?
Ooh, a buzzword. I would think it's more, less of maybe it is a buzzword, but more of a concept that we think there should be free data somewhere. But there's going to be free salary data, right? Because you have to pay money for data. But now magically with artificial intelligence, it's going to be free, right? Like I went outside and now I came inside and all the things in the store are free. They're not. They're not free. And so that's something that I think we're having to work through is that, data that you want to make decisions is still going to cost you in some capacity.
Good data, for sure.
Good data, absolutely. And in that space, you need to be comfortable with the data you're using.
Yes.
And sometimes when things are free, it may not align with the initiatives of the business.
What's the most surprising founder lesson that you've learned so far?
Trying to think of how to word this. That even though things are written down, and even though signatures are on the things that are written down, there still may be opportunities where you have to go back and re-explain things that were written down and signed.
I love how you put that. I totally know what you mean.
You know what I mean. You know what I mean.
Absolutely know what you mean.
You know what I mean. You know what I mean. And then you have that moment of like, what else have you signed that you didn't read, right? And so and then I'm like, no, don't think that but yeah, it's that. Okay, so let's just go back and I find I do a lot of that, right? Like you're kind of always in that negotiating space of like, well, let's just relook at what we chatted through. And most people, when you ground them in the facts and a very low, emotional space, they're like, oh yeah, okay. But I've had to. You understand? I've done that a couple times.
I understand. I like to always remind myself, like, whatever you're thinking, don't think it right now. Stick to the facts.
Right.
Because it'll come through.
Oh, yes.
Last one. What's one piece of advice that you were given as a founder that you ignored and you're happy you ignored?
I think it was probably more the comments. Like there's other comp consultants. You're too small. No one's going to work with you. There's bigger players in the space. You haven't been at a big four consulting firm, so you don't have all the relevant experience. And I think I just didn't listen. And I just continued to push the boat out. I've been really fortunate that yielded a lot of fruit for me in my corporate career. And I think it's been really promising in a business space. You're going to meet a lot of people with a lot of opinions.
Yes.
There are tremendous people that are going to help you on your journey. You'll never get criticism from someone who's doing more than you. Winners focus on the next thing. Losers focus on winners.
Yes. Yes. Ignoring the haters. This has been an amazing conversation.
Thank you for having me.
How can listeners connect with you?
Certainly. So you can reach me at Cynthia@WellPay.ai. That's my email. I'm a prolific emailer, so very happy to email and send notes. And I'm very active on LinkedIn. So Cynthia Abbot Kerr, feel free to connect with me, send me a note. I'm very happy to have conversations about, where you might want to take your compensation strategy, what data might be relevant to you. And I'm a firm believer that there's a fit and practice for everyone. So happy to be that partner in that space.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.